people have always described me as being bold, but I never really thought of it of like, I'm being bold, I'm going to do something bold. It's just kind of almost like reflex. It's almost a reflex for me because I'm just, I wouldn't call it bold, I would call it audacious. And so I'm very audacious, and I've heard people say like, wow, you're so strong-willed, but it's also because I know my actual will. I know God's will for my life. So when you have that understanding of who you are and where you're supposed to go, then you can be strong-willed into getting there.
So I know that you'll agree, enjoying myself while I work is the vibe that I'm trying to be on. So I want to invite you guys to Sidebar ATL here in Atlanta, Georgia. Sidebar, on top of the good food and live music, they have 3 different experiences. That means you can join me in the garden room, in the gold room if you want to try the top of the line hookah, and they also have the dungeon where I hear what happens in the dungeon stays in the dungeon. So it's the perfect mix. If you're here on business or you want to blow off some steam after work, you can meet me at Sidebar ATL so that you can have a little bit of dinner and then turn up afterwards if that's your jam. So check us out, 79 Poplar Street here in downtown Atlanta, or you can call 678-800-0741. Let's get it, work and play at the same time, right? Welcome to another episode of the Work and Play podcast. I'm your host, Ariel Young, and today we have a really, really dope expert. I said expert. A question expert. Listen, I am so excited to have a conversation with you. I'm not sure if you're ever on this side of the table, but when a question person gets to ask a question expert question.
It's a big deal. It's a big honor, like you said. The roles are usually reversed for me, so I'm going to try to not ask you questions naturally in this interview and answer everything that I'm here to do. So thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
100%. Thank you. I'm honored for you to be here and ask away, child. Most of the time, I'm super, like in my real life, people are like, you always interrogate me.
Yeah, same.
I'm okay with being interrogated.
Same.
So this is all about, two people who have found their niche, and are on their own personal journey. But one, we get to talk to Miss Neisha Rogers.
I'm very excited. So I am the question expert, like Ariel just said. I'm a master interviewer. I've always loved doing it. I've always loved asking questions. Ever since a young age. And so I do, as of right now, have my own podcast called Finding Your Niche with Neish. And it kind of stems from me asking that question, which is a big question that most people ask, is what am I here for? What am I supposed to do? What is my calling? What is my niche?
Yes.
And so I think that's an important question. One, if not, I would arguably maybe one of the most important questions to ask yourself. Yeah. And so on my podcast, we kind of facilitate that conversation of what are you supposed to do? What is your purpose? And how can you refine or niche down? And so my name is Neish, so it's just kind of like a fun way to say it, but yeah. Yeah,
no, but you're right. I think that in entrepreneurship, it is one of the foundational questions that you should ask yourself in business. But when you're interviewing, do you ever find, or I'm sure you do, find that niche question can go to anyone in any type of profession, and you can go down so many different routes? Yeah,
it's interesting because sometimes I have people on, and I try to keep people on to come and talk about what is their main niche. But being in entrepreneurship, and then eventually sometimes that develops into becoming a serial entrepreneur. You have multiple businesses. So sometimes, the conversation can kind of get astray, but I try to always gear it back to the foundation of what we're supposed to talk about. What is the niche that you're currently practicing in, and what is the niche that you're making the most strides in? So it kind of varies, but sometimes it's spot on because that person does only occupy one space or one industry. But sometimes people do multiple things, and then we kind of touch on those too as well. So it varies.
Yeah, you talked about the veering off, right? And so what people may not know is, as an interviewer, we guide the conversation, especially when there's a topic at hand. But internally, I always get distracted. We were talking about this before the podcast started. So I'm curious, when you're interviewing people, where does your natural curiosity go?
I think for me, the way that I like to explain interviewing, or at least my process, is kind of like dancing, right? I feel like the interview itself is essentially a dance. So if you're, let's say, for example, if we're doing ballroom dancing, and you take your left foot forward, that means I have to take mine back. And then when I come forward, you have to go back. So I kind of feel like, to me, the way that I explain an interview process is literally like us having a dance. And so we're taking turns, And I also like to explain it as we're having a listening exchange. So it's not just a conversation, we're having an exchange of listening to each other. And so I think of it kind of like that, like, okay, let's dance. And so sometimes, since it is my platform and it is kind of like my responsibility to facilitate the conversation and make sure that the information is, understood and known, I do have to kind of like make sure that I lead, so to speak, in the dance, and make sure that you have to kind of balance. It's hard because you have to balance two things. You have to make sure that your audience is getting what they want, while at the same time not compromising your guests' comfortability and what they want to speak or talk about.
Yes.
So that's why I say it's kind of like you have to know how to do it. It's very strategic, and you have to be skilled at it. It sounds easy, like, oh, I'm just going to ask some questions and then start a podcast. But to be a good one or to distinguish yourself, you have to know how to like balance those two concepts.
Absolutely. Are you still trying to get a leg up on your entrepreneurial career? Now, I told you about the Morning Meetup, the community that was created for the betterment of entrepreneurship. And we are cooking up some really cool things. Now, here's the thing. If you join today, you can actually get in for 60% of the original price. So if you join today, all you have to do is download the app, and I provided the link below so that you can join us. We have community, we have a book club, and it's the largest group that meets every single day, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. to literally get a head start on entrepreneurship. So if you're still trying to grow, you don't know what your business is going to be, but you know you want to be an entrepreneur, this is the community for you. So check out the Morning Meetup, click the link below, download the app, and join us today. You mentioned like the guest comfortability.
Yeah.
How often do you find yourself wanting to know more, but then also being like, oh, but we on camera?
It depends. And I think that goes back to like your preparation for the interview and what you can, where do you have liberty to dig a little bit deeper, and where you're like, okay, no, that's a hot button, I'll just stay away from that. So for me, I prepare the interviews. I do my research on my guests. I make sure I understand their background, and sometimes
I envy you.
Why?
Because the preparation already sounds like way more than I put into
I love doing it. So, and also like, it's kind of like, when I do videography, people are like, please, do this, make me look good. And I'm like, I'm going to make you look good because I want myself to look good. Mm-hmm. And so because you're a representation of my brand, my platform. So the same energy, the same exertion transcends even into my podcasting and interviewing. I'm going to make sure the interview is good because I want to maintain this persona of being the question expert. So I'm going to do my research. So I do the research beforehand. And then even sometimes if I know I can get in contact with somebody who's close to that person, then I'll talk to them about that person and have like another angle or another perspective of them.
Yeah.
And then I always ask, when I do my pre-interview, I don't always do a pre-interview, but in the case that I do, I ask them, is there anything you don't want to talk about? Mm-hmm. So that way I know up front, this is off limits.
Gotcha.
And so then I don't put myself in an awkward position of like asking a question and then they're just sitting there, or they give me a cold answer and then the interview just turns cold. Like it's just bad. So if you do your research, if you prepare, you kind of know where you have some wiggle room to pry on some stuff, and then other times it's like, don't ask.
Yeah. Well, as you kind of answered the question, but I'm curious, where does Neisha, like, where do you go? Do you more so like to talk about career stuff? So here's the thing. Some podcasts are all about money. Talk about the plays.
Oh, yeah.
Some podcasts are about relationships. Sometimes I find myself talking like a whole 30 minutes about relationships.
Really?
And I'm like, this is not a relationship. So like, where do you have to tell yourself, dial it back to keep the podcast centered around the topic?
Well, I think the cool thing about this industry that we're in is I've always just been fascinated by people. I've always been fascinated by sociology and how people interact with each other, and just the whole cycle of life and behavior. And so to me, I'm really interested in what makes that person them. And so when I'm interviewing somebody, I'm like more so trying to learn topics and themes around what has guided them to behave a certain way, or what has led them to accumulate a certain level of success based on who they are as a person. So I'm really big on people. I'm really big on what makes them tick.
I love that.
I've been a people person like for the majority of my life.
I think that what I like about the way you ask the questions is they're very pointed. Right? I think we talked about this, but some people have a way of like dancing around a topic, and you sometimes you ask it like straight on.
Yeah.
Right? So when I think about your style, it is almost like, you know, an exploration of like what makes a person tick. Do you feel like it's ever, with your experience, like interviewing people, what reaction do you get from folks? Are they...
I think my style is kind of like what you said. Sometimes I'm able, and it might be because my background's in journalism, so sometimes I'm able to just kind of like cut to the heart of the question and just ask it, which is it's actually easier said than done. It's hard when you're like, how do I just straight up ask? But sometimes that is like literally the only method to getting the answer, is just to be kind of like upfront and going straight for it. But most times the sentiment that I get when people sit with me is that I seem very warm and I seem very inviting, and then they feel very safe. And so when people feel safe, they are more susceptible to become more vulnerable. And then when they're more vulnerable, they're more prone to share things with you that they haven't shared with other people. And that's why my tagline is that I get people to speak about things they haven't spoke about and think about things they never thought of, because I present questions and ideas to them that they hadn't necessarily contemplated until we're in the moment in real time. And then, you know, breakthroughs happen.
Yeah, selfishly, I like that too. But then I've always been like, how do I let them know that I'm going to ask it so that they don't feel off guard?
I tell them up front. I tell them that I'm here for you. I tell them what we just talked about, that I'm here for you, but I'm also here for the people who want to know more about you. And so just having that kind of understanding up front will help them to feel, I don't know, just kind of like be aware of where the conversation could go. Yeah. So yeah, if you're upfront about it, like, hey, I'm going to ask you this, like these are things we want, you know, I'm going to talk about some of these things, but yeah, getting people to kind of unravel, that's the tricky part.
But the preparation, like you said, arms you with that information so that you know where you might be curious enough to go. Yeah. And then they know that they can actually open up about certain things because you're aware. Yes. Sounds very therapeutic.
Yeah, I would describe it that way.
I would love to sit in your chair.
Yeah, I'm a lot cheaper. So, if you want to come and sit with Neish and find your niche, it's probably affordable. So yeah, I'm a lot cheaper than a therapist and get some of the same results. So yeah, it's
100%. And technically, like when the more someone talks about stuff, and they have those light bulb moments, that gives them something to go into therapy with. Yes, right. Absolutely. Coming from a helping professional perspective, that definitely, someone who's able to till the soil is definitely valuable.
I like that analogy.
Yes. Wow. Yes. I use that in my coaching all the time.
Really?
Yes, we till the soil because there are things that are so deep down in the surface. Yes. Right? Which is why I like the way you interview, which is like, if you feel the confidence to just go after it because you're curious, great. But then sometimes you don't know what's under there.
That's true.
So we have to like, you know, kind of figure out, ask you a couple things, get you to explore, and then we get to the root of it. Yep. So yeah,
I love that.
You're tilling the soil, sis.
Thank you. I'm out here tilling soil. I didn't even know, but yeah, that's dope. I like that sounds. Okay.
So you mentioned your background is in journalism, and I'm always curious about the career journey because people have toolboxes that they didn't even realize they were accumulating. Yes. So like, did it start with journalism, or was Neish back there with the
I would say, well, I've always liked speaking, so I'm an international spoken word artist. So I've always loved the idea of mass communications, being able to get a message to the masses. So being able to talk to a lot of people at once, essentially. Yeah. And so I started doing that with poetry, and then realizing like, I've always kind of known like I have something important to say, and then I've noticed that when I do say it, people are very responsive to it, or they're very captivated by it. And so I knew like at a young age, like God had told me that I was going to be a talk show host. And so I always had that in my mind at 12, but I never really knew like, how is that going to happen? How are the pieces going to come together? How is it going to come into fruition? And so I just knew like, stay in media as much as you can. So I kind of dabbled with helping out with people who already had their own like small level talk shows. And then I went to school for media as well, for film and broadcasting, got my degree, and then got a job at a television network, doing news. And there I got to be an entertainment reporter and lead production manager. And from that sense, I've always been fascinated about narrative. So when I was in news, it does get a little bit depressing because a lot of the news that's driven to tell stories are negative. You know, they're not the most positive things. And when you turn on and watch the news, you're going to see more bad than good. Right. And so I learned that in news. Like if we're talking about some transferable skills that I use now from then, is that I learned about narrative, I learned about agenda setting, I learned about the psychological elements of storytelling through that scope. And then I thought, I can do whatever I want. I can be whoever I want, because nowadays we really have no excuses. Like, you got a talk show right now. Like, we're doing it right now.
That is so true.
And so there's more power in that. And I thought, okay, I want to leave out of here eventually and transition into creating my own narratives and being able to tell my own stories the way that I want to do them. So yeah, I became a videographer, but have also been fascinated with the deeper meanings of things and people and circumstances. Yeah. And so my background started in that journalistic approach of wanting to know more, and then that's just led me to always ask questions, and so now I have the podcast where I get to do that.
Exactly. And you take to this environment like water. The way that you show up in front of the camera is very much like anyone would imagine, she's been a news anchor. Like you were destined to be a news anchor because the way you present. Okay. What I love is that you are super real though. Like whenever you go, you can go to New Orleans, you can go to LA, every newscaster sounds the same, and you almost feel like, is this person a real person?
Right. Yep.
But the beauty is I get a chance to see you on the other side of the camera. So there was something that you were sharing. You said that when you noticed, you always want to have a TV show, so I'm like, I need to stay close to media. Yes. That for me, that's a strategic move.
Yes.
At that age, what was Neish doing when you decided, like, okay, I need to stay close to media? What could you have taken to at that time?
I think, well, for one, Oprah is like my go-to for the way I want to be and live and act. So me and my mom, it actually was quite a tradition for us. Every day after I would get out of school at 4 o'clock, we would literally sit down and watch Oprah together, like every day, Monday through Friday. It was like our routine. Oh. And so that, like seeing her and seeing that element, in her element, it just always resonated with me. I've always just known, like, if I can just stay close to production or anything, like, I'm sure I'll get to that point. And I always like to say too, like, I love Oprah, obviously, but kind of like to what you were saying, I'm real. So I'm a hybrid, and I feel like I have substance and like what I have to say, but I'm also fun and kind of likable and relatable. So I try to say like I'm a cross between Oprah and maybe Jimmy Kimmel or something, or somebody like that.
Okay.
But yeah, I definitely see myself being a late night talk show host, but with still having the substance, still having the deeper conversations, the more conscious discussions. And so, so I've always just made sure, stay in media, stay in production, whether that be being a part of a club that dealt with production or befriending people who were already in those spaces and making sure I stayed in their radar and asked when I could help them or how could I serve. And so doing that has been a result of me being able to leverage those relationships and then gain opportunities from them and then make strides in the given field.
Were you ever, when we think about, like, I think it's amazing how you have this natural inclination, right? One, shout out to Mom for sitting you down in front of Oprah. I didn't even watch Oprah growing up.
Shout out to Mom. Yes, every day, faithfully. So that's why I'm like, this is me. This is so me.
It was destined.
It was destined.
But then from the career moves, who would you say was that person who helped you out with making those career moves?
It's just a couple of strategic, it's very strategic. It's weird how God does that, like it's weird how God places different people in your life, in your ecosystem, and how everybody plays a very intricate role to get into where you needed to be. So I remember we moved to Charleston.
From where?
From Portugal.
What?
Yeah, we were overseas. We were overseas for a little while, and so we moved to.
The question is, like, were you an Army brat? What were you doing in Portugal?
No, my husband is Air Force. Oh. Yep, so we were stationed out there for 2 years.
Got it.
And I had a lot of fun doing that. But yeah, so we got to Charleston. I decided to get a certificate in production. Okay. I did really well in the classes. I befriended my professor, who was very well connected in the city in production spaces. He actually referred me to get the job at the news station. I was there for a little while, excelled there. They saw me there and also gave me the opportunity to become an entertainment reporter. And then after that, I was able to transfer to another station where they saw me, and then I became an evening news producer. And so the way that I like to just explain being a producer, because I think that's a big part of of telling a story or having video is the producing aspect of it. How does it all come together? How does it all unravel? But it's basically, as a news producer, you are responsible for what people see and hear on a newscast. It's all the producer. They write the scripts, they stack the stories, they decide which anchor is saying what, they decide what clips are being shown at what time. So it's a big responsibility. And so I was given that responsibility that led to like other responsibilities when I went and finally got my degree in mass communication. And that led me to making some connections out here. So it's like, it's very strategic. And then I had a moment where I was actually I was a co-host on a radio station in Charleston as well. And so it's just been different people, whether it be professors or work colleagues or mentors who have helped push me, who have seen the vision and are like, yeah, go and do that. Now, I will say this, for this podcast that I have in particular, I never even thought of doing a podcast until last year. And I walked into the office one day and a friend of mine says, we're going to start shooting your podcast on Tuesday. And I'm like, I don't have a podcast. And he's like, you do now. And I'm like, on Tuesday? Like a Tuesday is in like 4 days? And he's like, yes, Tuesday is in 4 days. We're going to start shooting it. And so after that, sometimes that's all you need is somebody else to say, just do it. Like, what do you keep waiting for? Things are not necessarily always going to just fall in your lap. You have to create them, like what we're doing right now. You have to create the opportunity. And so when he told me that, it never even dawned on me like that I could do that, or and now that I think about it, I'm like, this is the closest thing to getting to have an actual talk show.
Absolutely.
And so I'm so glad I did. And I always tell people the biggest thing is just to start by starting, because for the longest I was just like, I don't know how you're going to do it, God, but I know you are. And then now I have the show.
I'm also picking up the fact that what I was going to ask earlier is like, okay, it sounds like there wasn't that one mentor who guided you throughout your entire career to this point. It sounds like you have had a vision, right? You've done things, and people around you have picked up on the qualities, and they've put you in opportunities, put you in places where you can continue to, hone your craft and work towards your vision.
Yeah, and I think that's important because I heard Oprah say a quote before that there's no such thing as luck, or if you were to describe luck, it would be when preparation meets opportunity. And I think that's kind of been the biggest outlier in my path, is that when the opportunities did come, when the people did present me with opportunities, I was prepared for them. I was ready for them. So like the stars are kind of like always aligning for the most part. And I think that's key, is to be able to be ready. Like we ask for things all the time. We might pray and like ask other people for favors, but it's like when it's in front of you, will you be able to walk into that moment in your fullness? And I like it. There's a quote that Will Smith says that I really like, and he says, your talents will fail you if you're not skilled in them. So yeah, I can be talented all I want at talking and asking questions, but if I'm not practicing that, if I'm not trying to be skilled at that on my downtime, then they will fail me in the long run. So I think it's so important to just be ready for when the moment comes, because it's coming.
You never know when that knock on the door is coming.
Yeah, so true.
I love it. Another thing that I'm thinking about when it comes to me knowing you and seeing you kind of develop in the same community, it's your boldness. So like off the camera, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Neish in action, but I'm recalling at the morning meetup. Talk about psychology and understanding people. You kind of are my spirit animal, because we sang the whole a milli from the start to the finish. And you said, if you guys want to be a millionaire, come to the front. I swear we had a mini concert.
We did.
Have you always been, from a personality side, have you always been that chick from 6 or 7? When did you notice that in yourself?
For the longest time, I kept blaming it on being a Leo. So, people are like, oh, Leos are bold. They speak their mind. They're so blunt. So for the longest time, I kept doing that and saying that it was because of that. But yes, to answer your question, I've always been bold. People have always described me as being bold. But I never really thought of it of like, I'm being bold. I'm going to do something bold. It's just kind of almost like reflex. It's almost a reflex for me, because I'm just, I wouldn't call it bold. I would call it audacious. And so I'm very audacious, and I've heard people say like, wow, you're so strong-willed. But it's also because I know my actual will. I know God's will for my life. So when you have that understanding of who you are and where you're supposed to go, then you can be strong-willed into getting there. And so that strong-willedness, that audaciousness, that tenacity has always been in me, and I just try to have fun with it. I've had to learn along the way of how to do it with tact, because sometimes it can be misconstrued, and it has been misconstrued, my boldness, for rudeness. And so I'm learning how to get better at doing that. But yeah, my ability to be bold has helped me in a lot of ways.
I love that. And it creates an experience. Like you said, you like to have fun, right?
Yeah.
The thing about it, and we haven't talked about this part of your journey, but you were behind the camera for a while.
Yes.
Like that skill set of being able to pull people and bring the energy out.
Yes.
And create an experience, that right there, it builds a toolbox that most people don't even realize, because you get a chance to allow other people to have fun.
Yes.
So even in you doing that, it was the spotlight was on you.
Yeah.
But I remember that moment like that was my favorite part of the concert.
So what Ario's talking about is that the morning meetup, we had like a little after party after the morning meetup event, and there was karaoke, and everybody came on stage and did karaoke, and then I happened to request a Millie by Lil Wayne, and when I went up there, like you said, I just called everybody, if you want, because everybody was just kind of like still in their seats. And then I'm like, if you want to be a millionaire, come down here. And then I just rocked out. I don't know. It's just, I just like to have fun with it. I just understand what other people would find fun. And so I'm very big on inclusion. And so I'm like, come down here. We'll all have a good time together. But yeah, that's just kind of like how it's always been. I love being behind the camera, like you said, but I've also like enjoyed thoroughly being in front of it. And so that was a moment where I'm like, it's my time to shine, and I'm gonna own it.
It was a picture perfect moment.
Thank you.
Thinking of your experience in behind the camera, when was the first time you put your hands on the camera?
First time I put my hands on the camera, let me think. I would say at least like more than about a decade ago now at this point. But I learned when I did get my first camera was back in, I think, 2013, like my first actual camera. We got it for Black Friday. And I just remember being so excited about it, but also kind of feeling like, I don't really know what to do with it. But very excited to have it. And then I had a couple of friends again that kind of like, come on, Neish, like I'll show you, we'll take you under our wing and teach you like exactly what to do and how to use it. And then I goes back to like being able to do mass comm, right? Being able to have a message that can reach many people. And video is a great entity that does that. You could make a video one time. You're going to make this podcast episode one time, and then thousands of people can see it and hear it. It's mass communication. And so I saw that I could do that through video and make very powerful videos and make very powerful messages that could essentially still be mass communication. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, and then there's different ways of doing that. You can be creative, you can be journalistic, you can be very like straightforward, cinematic. So there's just so many variables and facets that you can contribute to shooting video that just make it worthwhile. And so when I picked up a camera and I started like wanting to tell stories through video, the rest is kind of history. So my favorite type of stories to tell are documentaries, because going back to my news background, I love true stories. I love stories that are true. I love stories that really happen to real people. And so I love being able to give people that kind of opportunity to see what it's like to be somebody else for the day, or what it's like, what it takes to be that person through documentary storytelling.
I love it. Are you saying that the camera was purchased as a gift first and then you explored it as like, oh, it does fit within the strategy?
No, I was asking for it because I knew like I wanted to do video. I wanted to tell video, so I asked for it. And then when I got the camera, I just fell in love. It was instant. It's like putting on a sock. It was like, oh, this is just the perfect fit. Like this is so me. Like this is who I am. And so, yeah, I still pick it up, every now and then, and get to tell these passion stories that I really like, especially doing documentary filmmaking. But yeah.
I I envy it. One, for a long time, this podcast was shot with my cell phone.
Hey, you gotta start somewhere. That's okay.
And now I got the whole production, but I still am a bit intimidated by all the settings, right?
Yes.
To be like, okay, so I want the lighting to look like this, not like what I have on. I looked at your camera, I was like, wow, like how did she set it up, right? The technical part of it.
Yeah.
How much does that jive? Because what I'm hearing is the necessity to stay close to the media.
Yes.
Because you have a vision to have a talk show. And that's what leads the career at this point. And then there's like the inclination to say, oh wait, I can tell stories through a camera. But, so there's a route. There's talk show host niche, and then there's videographer niche.
Yes, yes.
So at what part in the like technical process of like the videographer, how deep do you like to go? And then when are you like, okay.
Yeah, you know, that's actually one of my, I would say as a videographer, as a storyteller of video, that's one of my weakest things. I'm not technical at all. I wouldn't say that at all. That's absolute. I'm not as technical as I am the other elements. And I don't want people, and that's a good question you're asking, because people do get discouraged by that. Like if they don't really fully understand all the settings or things like that, like you're not alone. Like I don't either. But I'm out here making dope videos, and I think that I would say the biggest thing that would attribute to making a dope video for me, because there's a lot. We're in Atlanta, and there's a lot of videographers. There's a lot of people who shoot. There's a lot. I like to say there's a lot of people with cameras, but there's not a lot of storytellers.
Yeah.
So yeah, you might understand aperture, or you might understand color grading and white balance, all the technical things. But it's like, okay, great, it looks great, but at the end of the day, are people being moved? Are people being evoked after watching your video? If they're not, then you're just doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
And then what good is that? You just made a video for yourself? Nobody wants that. And so I would say that the biggest facet to, you know, being a videographer, if you want to pursue that, is learning how to be a good storyteller first, and then that other stuff will come.
I love that. I really do. I think that in this space, like as a content creator or a client, I'm oftentimes looking for someone who can tell a story and can brainstorm with me, because the ideas are in here. But again, going back to tilling the soil, I need something to help me figure out how to get what I see in my mind into the camera shot. And I'm not even too tied to the aperture or the lighting. It's like, I just want to convey my story.
Exactly.
So that really does put you in a position where it's like, it's rare.
Yeah.
It's very rare.
It's very rare.
Yeah.
I know. I call myself the Jill of all trades. And I'm excited to share that too, because I love that you asked that question too. I think this will be my first time actually announcing it on camera or in public. But I'm actually starting a community called Chicks That Shoot. And so it'll be a safe space for women to come who are like, I don't really know how to, like I got a camera, but I don't really know how to use it all the way, or I don't really know how do you put the pieces together to do storytelling. And so the goal is that the woman will walk away feeling dope, sexy, and cool while using a camera for video. And when I say dope, what I'm trying to say is you learn the camera competencies. You become dope at just having a camera. Right? You learn about the functionalities, you learn about the basics in a very digestible way. And then when I say sexy, I mean you learn about the storytelling techniques. Like what you're saying, like, oh, how did you decide to do it from that angle? And why did you choose to use that soundbite? Making your video actually sexy through storytelling techniques. And then when I say cool, I mean once you learn it, you can kind of manipulate it and create your own rules. And to the point to where you can create creative impact, where it's like, I've never seen nothing shot like that before. Now that's pretty cool. And so I want to create this community for women to be able to be dope, sexy, and cool while using a camera for video, and just represent that and facilitate that energy where we can learn from each other, grow from each other, share videos with each other, and essentially do what we came here to do, which is tell a bigger story through mass communication.
That's a niche right there.
Hey, so I'm very excited. I'm very, very excited about that. So teaching women how to do what I've been doing, and then hopefully some of them maybe want to be in front of the camera, and they also want to learn how to use the camera. I can also expend my energy to explain that facet as well. Yeah,
that's where my mind goes in terms of the person, the ideal client, right? Or the ideal community member. I see her as someone who enjoys being in front of the camera, but the camera is the tool. So as much as you can learn about the technical part of it, the better you'll be able to even tell your own story.
Exactly, and the more control you have, and the more power you have over how people interpret who you are. And so it's like when you understand, like, okay, this is how I want it to look, this is the vibe I'm going for, this is the ambiance that I want, you know, in my set, in my video, and then you can just present yourself in a way in front of the camera like the way you want to be received, because you have all the power in the world now. So yeah, I'm teaching people how to have power. Women, at least.
I just got this you might not think it's dope, but I just got this dope analogy in my head.
Okay.
So, you know, as women, we get the stigma that we don't know how to work a car, right? We only know how to put gas in the tank. And I think that the empowerment of knowing how to use the car, it really is what we're talking about here in the camera setting. Because I think a lot of women are at the mercy of videographers. Who are maybe male driven. I don't know the industry, but male driven.
Oh, for sure, male driven.
And they're not thinking about what we're thinking about.
Exactly.
But this is an empowerment.
This is an empowerment
play.
And confidence booster for women to walk away and feel essentially more confident and more capable of being able to execute a vision that they originally had through video, with the resources and tools that I can provide from my story, doing it, you know, over a decade now, to just feel like that. Because I do agree with you, like, especially with the analogy you're using with the car. My mom says, if you can drive any car. So if you know how to do the fundamentals, if you can drive a minivan or you can drive a Corvette. If you know how to drive, it doesn't matter. But once you learn the foundation and the framework for how to do it, you can kill it. And so that's what I plan to do is teach women how to kill it.
I love it. I can see it. So we got the vision.
You can see it? I'm good.
100%. Me, I am totally not. So because I'm in this space, I get questions a lot about the process. And I get to a point in my skill set where I'm just not even interested in answering that. Like, I only do the camera to the point where I can get the questions and the content out so that my clients can understand how to explore their life. But to the point where you want to know all this stuff about, like, podcast technicals.
That's okay.
So a woman like me, absolutely, I want you to empower me to use the tool that I have. Not particularly so I can shoot somebody else's event, but so that I can be able to tell my story and convey the message that I have.
Exactly.
So I totally see that vision.
Okay.
And then I see the women empowerment. And then I think women empowerment always comes up against a certain barrier in society, and certain, even to the point where a lot of your career moves have been about, like, relationships. Like in Portugal, and when you moved to Charleston, came to Atlanta, being able to be placed in these environments rely on relationships. As you've come to understand, like, your calling as it comes to you just being who you are and then empowering others. What has it been like to navigate, like, a male-dominated area like photography and videography and trying to reach your goal? The best way to support the Work and Play podcast is by subscribing to the YouTube channel and by going to your favorite podcast player to subscribe and rate the Work and Play podcast. That's all you have to do. So if you are liking the Work and Play podcast, the content, the stories that we're sharing, and you know that this will help someone, go ahead and share the content to someone who could actually use it and help them on their journey to transition from corporate into entrepreneurship. Now let's get back into the episode.
It's been interesting. Fortunately, I've been able to work with a really good group of guys. So I don't want to downplay, they're not giving us opportunities and chances, because there are people out there who do give you these chances. That's kind of like where I am today, because a lot of my male friends who are in the industry with me and who are videographers have given me chances and the ability to work alongside them. So I will say, for me, it hasn't been a terrible experience. It's just been a noticeable experience of the disconnect or the gap. And so I just noticed that, and noticed that it's a problem that needed to be solved. And so with me doing that, the Chicks That Shoot is to hopefully not extinguish men in the industry. That's not what I'm going for. It's just to create more opportunities and a more balanced space or a more balanced industry when it comes to shooting with male and females.
Yeah.
And so, I don't have a bad story to tell about working in the industry more than I'm just saying I just noticed there was a lack.
Absolutely. It feels a gap.
Yeah, it does.
It fills a gap 100%. And this, again, because what you're creating doesn't extinguish anything. Yeah. It only elevates what's already needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So taking it all the way back, young Neish who is watching Oprah, right? What kind of things were you doing as a kid that, could have been what you took to as a passion or a hobby?
I think like a combination of it being mixed with my personality. It's just always been curious. So I recently learned that the psychologists, the way they define curious is wanting to know. That's it. It's just the ability to want to know. And so at a young age, I've just always wanted to know things and understand things. I think my favorite question, if we were to look at the who, what, where, when, why, how, my favorite one of those questions is why. I'm a big why person. Yeah. And so I know there's a lot of 5-year-olds who are big why people. Like everything is why. And so I've just kind of always been that way at a young age. It's like if somebody tells me something or explains something to me or I am in a situation, I'm always walking away from that moment asking why. And so learning that that's okay. I would say my mom created margin for me and my brother to be able to ask that and ask why without being ridiculed or without being shut down. And so I would say at a young age, I've always been given the luxury of being able to ask. Because our culture,
Don't ask no questions.
Don't ask no questions. Don't ask no questions. You don't have nothing to say. Children don't need to speak. And so thankfully, and I have to just really credit my mom to that and my dad too, essentially, they just have always allowed me to ask questions. And so as a result of that, I've been able to ask questions my entire life. And so that's just kind of become my mantra is I think when you ask questions, there's opportunities for change and positive change. And so I've always kind of been that person where it's like, oh, why are you asking me that? Like you said, interrogating me. But at the end of the day, people walk away like, I'm glad you asked me that.
Yes. 100%. I get selfishly, I honestly don't care how you felt about that question. But I know that if you didn't think about it, now you thought about it. And the world is going to be a better place because if I'm asking someone a question who has a large platform and they're stumped, I'm okay with that. Yep. I just feel like you should, I love your analogies because ours are so different. Because I imagine like creating like the fact is we are creating new neural paths in people's brains. That's true. When they haven't thought about something, we're creating like, we're knocking on doors that they have never opened up.
So good. Yeah. Oh wow, that's really good.
And I think that is 100% where I take pride in it, and I think that's probably why I like the coaching side of it because I'm more about like where's the mental growth here, and I don't even too much worry about the presence, like my camera presence. Yeah. But I'm thinking about your mom and dad. You mentioned your mom and dad and how they created this environment for you to be curious. Yeah. And one, you said your mom gave you margin, so you knew, there was, I could
ask some questions.
Yeah. Did they ever share with you what they wanted you to do or who they wanted you to be? Were they?
I'm trying to think. No, not really. I'm really blessed in that sense too. That my mom and dad, and maybe that's kind of like me. I don't know. We're just very chill, very go with the flow. All three of us. I wasn't raised with them in the same household, but we all have the same kind of energy. My mom is very like, go for it. Like whatever you want to do, do it. Go. That's her always.
Is she an entrepreneur?
Yeah, she's a life coach.
How did I? Yeah. She's a life coach?
Yep, she's a life coach. And so she's always been like that. Her favorite saying, and everybody says it in our family when we're going through something that's an unfavorable circumstance, she always says, isn't it great? Isn't it great? Because this is like changing your perspective. And she's always just had a very, very big perspective on life and what you could achieve and what God has called you to do. And so, I've always had that, like, whatever you want to do, go do it. Go, yeah. And my dad, same thing, just like, I'll tell him what I'm doing or what I got going on, and he's like, wow, that's cool. But but I've never had them try to steer me in a direction of like where I should go. They've both thankfully been very, very open and respective of where I was trying to go.
And you had a life coach for a mom. That's a secret weapon.
It is, definitely is. My mom was the first person that taught me the concept of knowing, the importance at least, of knowing who you are. And I would say, like, I would have to credit her even today, like having Finding Your Niche with Neish.
Yeah.
It's just so important. And she made sure that I understood the weight of that at a young age, of knowing who you are, to help facilitate you and to help serve as the catalyst to get you to where you're supposed to be. And so there's just so much power, like when you know who you are, you know what you want to do, you know your skill sets, you know your weaknesses, you know about your personality, you know your love language, you know your apology love language.
Apology love language?
Yeah, there's an apology love language.
Tell me more.
So most people are familiar with their love languages, right?
Yeah.
It's a very popular thing. Same guy wrote a book called The Apology Love Languages, which is actually an exceptional tool to use to help navigate in your relationships, whether it be through family or friends. But basically the book teaches you how somebody can feel loved through you apologizing to them in the right way. Right? Because so let's be honest, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to miss the mark. We're all going to have to apologize at one point in our lives, probably many points in our lives. And the book teaches you how the person that you may have offended, how they like to receive an apology, so that it's just received in its fullness, and the reconciliation process can move forward. And so for me, my apology love language, I can't think of all of them right now. I can tell you mine and my husband's, but I know mine is restoration. So, and I feel like they all begin with the R, but don't quote me. But yeah, just look it up. Mine is restoration. So if something is done to me, I'm more interested in how are you going to restore what you just did. And so, that's just knowing that. It helps for my husband to be like, not just come to me and say I'm sorry, because I'm sorry doesn't work for me. I want him to come to me and say, wow, I apologize that I did that. Now since I did that, I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to restore it in this way. And then I feel like we have the ability to like be back in a space of harmony and love and peace. And I can fully accept his apology because it was given to me in the right way.
How has that been communicating that's a need of yours?
It varies because we're human. So sometimes me and my husband do a good job at like remembering it, and sometimes he like will completely forget it, and he just doesn't apologize that way, and vice versa. Sometimes I don't get it all the way right too. So it's actually just been in waves, making sure that it's consistent, and then just kind of knowing it and knowing that, having to come back to that. Sometimes you have to go back to the drawing board in life, where it's like you kind of forget who you are for a little bit, and it's just like, wait, what is going on? Like, no, this is the way that I like to receive love. This is the way that I like to apologize, because you can lose yourself in your surroundings and your sphere of influence. And so
that's true.
It's important to be able to like know it for yourself. In case other people don't know it, you can always remind them, because my mom has a quote, if you don't know who you are, the world will tell you. And so it's easy to get caught up in that, because if you don't, people will just start saying, this is who you are, this is what you do, this is how you behave, and then you'll just become more prone to portray those characteristics, not based off of your own ideas, but the ones that were given to you.
Absolutely. And before you know it, you're describing yourself as others think you are.
Yes.
And you're not even doing yourself. You're not honoring the true person that's inside of you.
That is so true.
Ooh,
yeah, it's a whole thing. So yeah, I definitely look up your apology love language.
I love that.
And see what they are. I can't remember all of them. I know I'm restoration. I think there's a restoration, reconciliate. Don't quote me. Just look it up, y'all.
I'm gonna look it up. Yeah, I love the restoration, because and even like outside of it being a apology love language, but when it comes to discipline, when it comes to like just the way the world is, we're very punitive.
Yes.
Right? We're very like, you did this, so I do this. You did this, so we're gonna do this to you.
Yes.
And the restorative, there's restorative justice, where people experience something like rape or something, and they don't get a chance to heal.
True.
Because you just threw that person away, and now I'm like, but what are you gonna do to make it better? Right? That then it leaves you kind of going back to the love language. It leaves you feeling like there's left, like we're still left with the void to fill.
Absolutely, and I think it's so important that we also operate from a place of empathy. The thing I try to remember is that like everybody is going through something. Everybody is not all the way where they want to be, even if it does seem like they're successful, or even if it seems like they're at the pinnacle of their life and their success or career. There's always an area that people haven't fully mastered, and there's always a space for them to become more whole in. And so when you look at people from this scope of that we're all just trying, you can respond to them differently because we're all in the same boat. And I would say that would be the common denominators. Yeah, there's some people out here doing, but they're still trying to do that. And so, that's helped me to kind of like be more sensitive to where people are at, what they're thinking, even if they're not necessarily treating me right. It's like, oh, okay. Like I see the areas where you still are trying to become whole at.
I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yes.
I think about your definitiveness in knowing your vision, and honestly, a lot of the opportunities that set you up for success, and having a mom as a life coach. I think all of those things are wonderful. And then I think about you being in Portugal, and I'm like, like being, then I'm like, okay, so what are the one media opportunities? Yeah. But I remember always thinking, like, if I were to be with a military man, that it would be confining or something like that. Would you mind sharing a little bit about like what has that experience been like traveling, even though you have like this vision? It's like has it ever been like, oh no, I want to be over here?
Yeah, actually for me, and this is like also a thing that's like, okay, that's unusual, but I actually love change.
Love it.
I love change. I get bored very easily. So God must have knew that too. Like, so for me to be married to somebody who's in the military where things are constantly changing and it's rare that they stay consistent and the same. That actually was like really fun experience for me because I like getting up and moving every 3 years and meeting new people and making new connections in different states and having new experiences and learning new cultures. And so, it's been a blessing for me. I will say the caveat to that is, because there's so much consistency and it's so fluid with having to like move around and bounce around, I kind of had to put my education on pause. And so I didn't want to like go to school because I can't do online. I cannot do online classes. So I knew like when I go to school, I want to be able to fully go and fully graduate all the way through in one sitting, not just like keep going back and then trying to, because I don't know where we're going to go.
Yeah.
And so I was saying like, it's just been interesting because even when we were overseas, I've always networked. I've always like been able to see the strategicness in relationships and just having genuine relationships with people. I was actually able to get awarded, which is not a thing either, but I was able to get awarded by the wing commander who's over the entire base.
Really?
Yeah, he coined me. So it's like a tradition that you do in the military. You get coined for certain things that you've achieved. And he just coined me for my leadership in hosting like different poetry events and speaking at different events on the base and stuff like that. And so it's always been fun for me because I'm like, well, I'm still going to find a way to shine. Like, even though this is my husband's path, his career, and I'm his helpmate, I've just been very outgoing, very outspoken, and always willing to see how to get involved, so to speak. And so there's been a lot of blessings that come from that. And so I was winged. I was coined by the wing commander of the base. I will say I have to credit my husband though, because it's kind of like we're playing tag team now. So he did his 10-year career in the Air Force. He got out. I ended up going to school, finishing, graduating with honors, getting the Student of the Year award, winning for film festivals. Yeah, girl. So I killed it when I went back. And then now it's kind of like passing the baton, and he's really supporting me. Because I'm fully doing this entrepreneur life, and he still works like in the corporate space as a stockbroker. And so I'm out here like being able to live out my dreams essentially and do the things that I want to do. And he fully supports me in that, whether it be financially, emotionally, intellectually. I'm very grateful for him because there's a lot of people in relationships where the male is intimidated by that, or he is he just doesn't want to do that, maybe because he's very traditional and he wants the wife to stay at home with the children. And I will say my husband is the complete opposite, because I started to feel that a little bit, like all these opportunities and like having to go certain places and having this busy schedule. I started to feel bad at one point, like, do you think I should slow down? Like, do you think I should stop? You know, I'm not spending as much time with our daughter. And he said, no, say yes while people are asking you. Say yes as much as you can. And always live your life and have it to where yes can always be on the table. And so I'm very, very thankful for him that he understands the mission and that he respects my calling and that he appreciates what I do contribute to our relationship and to our marriage. So I've been fortunate enough to be married to somebody who he just understands the assignment. And so, I'm very thankful.
I think you're fortunate in so many ways. And even the women, I'm thinking of a woman who comes into your community who can't quite see that she can live the life that you've lived. Right? She can't, like, she might even be a military wife and she's more in the traditional or the stereotypical relationship or dynamic. And being able to see like ways that it is possible to live out your dream and to have these conversations with your husband and to, you know, figure out what dynamic can you have, right? I think that I'm just envisioning a woman who...
and it takes some time. Like, I think that when they do come in this space, what I will be able to offer them is the opportunity or the ability to find their footing. It's not going to be the exact same. Like, my circumstance is different from their circumstance, but I will create a space where you have a blueprint of like, okay, here's some of the steps that I took that helped me, and if you're in this position and if you happen to be with someone or have a child, here's how you can navigate that, and if it helps you, I can teach you the way I did it. But it'll just serve as a blueprint for kind of like how I did it. But the goal is just find your footing. Like, you don't have to take off running. Like, you can start by just finding how to like find the foundation of like just being grounded with where you are and doing what you can do with what you have, with being in that specific moment of your life, in that specific season.
I love it.
Good.
These women gonna be opening up.
Yes, I'm so excited.
Yes. So excited. You mentioned relationships in so many different angles. And I'm like, how would it be if I were in like Portugal or any of these locations to re-establish relationships? What have you learned in like networking or relationship building, whether it's personal or business, in your travels just along your life?
I would say the biggest thing that I think people let fall by the wayside, there's a couple things that are very important. So if you're, I'll start with the first example. If you're dealing with somebody on a professional relationship, I would say etiquette is like a big factor to where that how far that relationship will go. Something just as small as like email etiquette. Like how do you approach people? How do you speak to people? What is your body language when you're around them? Are you assertive? Are you tactful in situations where you're kind of like mostly supposed to shadow and fall back? Are you reading the room? And so I think that has helped me in professional relationships. Just the proper greetings and staying professional the whole time, and then making sure that you're tactful. That has helped me in relationships. When it comes to just like friendships, I would say a big part of that is like being able to relate and understand, come up from a place of understanding. And then some like just gigs and business like relationships, I would say follow through has helped me tremendously. People forget to follow through, especially out here. You go to Atlanta and you go to a networking event and you meet different people and you're like so excited and you guys exchange Instagram information, and then you go home and then you just go back to your normal life and you're like, who did I meet last night? Or okay, that person followed me, but you don't really do anything with the actual setup. And so I think it's so important to follow through on these people that you meet, and that these people that God prompts you or nudges you, like you should know that person. Make sure that you don't drop the ball and you follow up with that person and like reach out to them again, no matter how long it takes. So yeah, like for instance, Track Baby. I've known Track Baby for a year now, and I've always just like every quarter or every couple of months I would just hit her like, hey, how's it going? I'm still interested in shooting video for you, and and so she would always like, yeah, thanks so much, like this is where we are right now. And then it's like, okay, cool, it's not the time is not now. But I still didn't get discouraged by that. I still like messaged her for about a year and a half until one day she said, did you see my story today or something? And I'm like, no, actually I just happened to reach out to you. And she said, I actually just posted that I'm looking for a videographer today, like an hour ago. And I was like, God, That's so awesome. Like how God will just give you the insight, He'll give you the information. But if you're not obedient, if you don't follow up, if you don't follow through, then it's easy to get it's easy to have like that become a detour in your path, because you could have like immediately gone here, but because you weren't obedient, because you didn't follow through and you weren't consistent, it kind of ventured you off. But yeah, you can always find your way back. It just might take you a little bit longer.
Etiquette. The last one was follow through, and the second one was understanding, empathy. Empathy,
yeah, and then just caring about people, caring about where people are. And like I said, I've just always been interested in people, and everybody likes it. Everybody likes to seem interesting. Everybody likes to be cared about. So I think if you remember that, then it's easy to have relationships with people, because everybody wants to be seen. Yeah. Whether it be through a camera or just through your own eyes and your own heart. It's like, I just want to be seen and understood. And so I've always just made that be a priority in my relationships with people, is like understanding them, to see how I could potentially help them, and see, if I could offer any advice or any resources to help them go further and where they want to go.
You know what I think is really cool? You're perfect in front of the camera.
Thank you.
You are.
Aw, thank you.
You are definitely meant to be on camera. I think that what I've learned a lot about people's lifestyles is the first half is usually the foundation or the need that they were building on something else. And because you spent so much time behind the camera, helping other people shine, supporting other people, I think that it's a great balance, and even an ego check, right? To be able to elevate others and put them out and understand them. And the etiquette and the follow through, those are definitely technicals, but the people person behind the camera, it sets you up to be the best person. Like, when it's time, all the roles.
Yeah, that is true. I never thought about it that way. I definitely accept that compliment and appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's a setup. I think that this is only the next chapter.
Yeah.
Right? It's only the next chapter, and we always look back. And what I really love about success stories, about stories in general, but success stories the most, is it was an evolution.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a journey.
It was a journey.
It was a whole journey. And and I feel like it's so interesting that you say that, because right now in this season in my life, I feel like it is a journey, but I feel like I'm at the cusp of something that's like big. I can't put my finger on it, but I feel like, you can kind of sense if somebody's like walking behind you, or you feel like something's behind you. Yeah. It's kind of like that right now with my dreams. I feel like something is like behind me, getting ready to like literally catapult me to another level, and I feel ready, and I feel excited, and I feel available to be in the moment fully and present. And so I'm just excited about what God's gonna do, but I do feel like I'm in my element. I feel like I'm in my zone. I'm in my bag right now with the podcast and video and the connections and the chicks that shoot. And so it's just very exciting.
I love it. Well, listen, Neish, there are people who are listening to your story, and I never want to forget the fact that there are folks who aren't living their dream and who don't feel like they're close to the cusp, but they want to get started. And for you to really be familiar from your husband in the corporate space, military space, and entrepreneurship space, and you being really good at, like, above all, the relationships aspect of it. What would you say, and it may not even be relationships, but what would you say, or what would you offer to a person who is navigating their career? They want to make stuff happen, right? Maybe they didn't sit down like with their idol, like learning how to become, right? And so they have to be more intentional about it at 30. What would you say to someone who's starting their journey now and they want to be intentional about it?
I would say to look at all of the variables that would have to change in order for you to get to where you want to be. Right? Look at what's around you. Look at the things, look at the literal things that have to change that are the most important. See if they can change, or see if you can pivot. If you do have the opportunity, for example, if that person is 30, let's say they are with somebody who is working full time, maybe their pivot is, okay, maybe I can't leave my job right now, but I can go to part time so that I work 3 days a week, and then I can, do my craft or perfect my craft the other couple of days. So it can be like that. It doesn't have to be these big jumps. Just look around you and look at the variables that need to change and see how they can change, into what capacity they could change. And then I would start there. And then I would also say, like, follow your gut, because your gut is like, it doesn't listen. I mean, it doesn't lie to you. Like, you have to listen to that thing, especially if you can't ignore it. I would say if you wake up every day and keep thinking about this thing and it just doesn't go away, you want to go ahead and feed that hunger.
Yeah.
Or else you're just going to end up being a miserable person. Now, whether you can feed it in its fullness is one thing, but at least start feeding it, like, bite by bite. And I always like to think that, like, your next step can literally be your best step. And so with that, I would just say, start small. You don't have to start big. Like, take it one step at a time. Look at the variables around you. Meet people that you need to meet, and make sure that you groom those relationships, and that you kind of like cultivate a bond with the people that are in the industry that you want to be in, so that you at least have a person that you could go to for advice or for counsel, and then maybe eventually for actual positions.
That's amazing. I love that.
And pray, of course.
Don't forget to pray.
Don't forget to ask God, what you want me to do? So, yeah, prayer.
That's amazing. I think that you guys got a really good glimpse into the mind of Neish. Like, I don't even think your advice is very strategic, very easy. Look at the variables around you and decide which ones need to change, and then you can even attack it, change the variables.
That's true.
Variables. And I'm such an analytical person. I love that. Listen, I've been getting energy off of your analogies all day. So, absolutely.
I really appreciate that.
Those of you guys who are watching and listening, I know, you're welcome. And for those who want to get connected with you, they want to learn more from you. And even, when does Cool Chicks Who Shoots come out?
Okay, so that is TBD. I will say by the summer.
Okay.
Yeah, by the summer I will have at least like a soft launch of Chicks That Shoot. And then if you're just interested in being on my podcast, if you have a niche and you're making strides in that niche, definitely I'm interested in talking to you so that you can come on Finding Your Niche with Neish.
Yes.
If you just want to kind of see my content or look at other people who found their niche and use that as inspiration to get you closer to yours, you can do that as well by going to my Instagram under Finding Your Niche. Neish is spelled my name, Neish. And yeah, let's go out here and pursue these dreams, y'all.
Let's go out here. Let's go be great, y'all.
Yes.
And until next week, I will see you guys soon. Peace.
Peace.
Good stuff.